As human beings, we learn things naturally. It's instinctive. From birth on, we're learning things based on our needs and our wants. No one teaches a child to walk. We assist, we provide model, but the child learns to walk on their own. They talk because there's a need to talk. They see a value in talking. Over those first few years of life, everything they learn is based on the fact that they want to learn it. And all of that seems to come to a screeching halt when they get into formal education.
When humans of any age think about what they're doing, they're engaged. When they think about what they're doing, they're self-reflective. When they think about what they're doing, they learn.
I would say our culture doesn't support thinking. Our accountability measures and metrics aren't set up in a way. They're all still demanding an answer.
We talk about education, we talk about schools, we talk about, parts of the country, we talk about tests and everything else. And I almost never hear people talking about the individual child.
Along the way, we stopped looking at who we have in front of us. We don't know what they're going to need to know when they grow up, but they need to be able to be aware of themselves as an individual, as a thinker, as a learner.
The point of school is to learn. We need to be ready for new things, which is why we need to be flexible. Letting us learn more in the direction of what we want to learn is good.
If we don't keep our eye on the big picture of the whole human being that we're teaching, we may do a really good job of teaching to 47 and a half different standards, and we may blow the big picture.
You're told early on in school, you have to score certain grades so you can get into the best college, so that you can get the best job. And then once you have the best job, you're gonna make the most money and your life is gonna be so amazing. But if somewhere along the line that doesn't work out for you, or you're not such a great student, before you even get the chance to excel, you're already feeling defeated.
I think we have to really use our common sense. What do they need to know? They need to know how to learn. They need to know how to think. They need to know how to communicate. And then it doesn't matter what you teach them.
When we understand what a child or a student or a learner is thinking, we understand the learner. Seeing what they're building and exploring that and valuing that. If you see the child, they will open up. They will become engaged because they know, they have a deep sense that you see them. And when we don't see children, they go exactly the opposite way. They stop seeing you, they become disenfranchised, they stop listening, they start acting out, and all these things that we want to avoid start to happen.
I conducted a qualitative study with young people who left school, and the questions that really drove the research were, how do they remember the experience of being in high school?
I didn't feel good. I felt depressed. I felt very overloaded.
It's a system, and you're put in one end and you're blown out the other, and in the middle they inject you with information. It doesn't matter if you want to know it. It doesn't matter if it matters.
If they were to try to articulate why they left, what would they say?
I felt trapped in this place, this very unwelcoming place.
I felt part of a system that was geared toward chugging out these normal kids, and it wasn't personalized. It was pretty much like I felt I wasn't even there.
I also asked them if they were king or queen for a day, what changes they would make that they think would be helpful to future students similar to themselves.
I just wish that there was some way to instill the bravery in kids that maybe there is something else out there.
And I always wondered what was out there when I was sitting in class, you know? Schools need to listen to the kids. Not just certain kids, but all the kids. Because that was one of my biggest problems. Going, trying to get help, and not being heard.
Not being known and not feeling valued were two of the main themes to come out of this. A third one was that they didn't feel like they were learning anything that they could use.
We're not preparing kids to work in factories anymore. And I guess that's the piece. What are we preparing them for? And because there's that uncertainty there, I think that we revert back to sort of like our old ways because we're comfortable there.
We aren't comfortable being led to a place we don't know exists.
It's a hard time to be a teacher. I think harder now than almost ever before. And I guess I'm trying to find a way to feel hopeful enough that I could still encourage folks to go into the profession.
Unfortunately, the latest movements in education have moved us to a place where we've sort of removed the ability of teachers to be connected to what made them a teacher in the first place.
There's a high percentage of teachers that are dropping out of teaching within the first 5 years. Initially, when you start out teaching, you know, you're struggling with mastering content, mastering classroom management, dealing with state regulations, certification. You get overwhelmed with all the little minutia, and you forget the big ideas.
I'm a teacher because as I got older and as I met teachers who I felt genuinely cared about my future, that I realized all of this had a purpose and that I would one day be able to give back.
I think I became a teacher because I wanted to change the world and felt like school provided an opportunity I didn't see anyplace else to creating a different vision of what education could be and what the world could be.
I've always wanted to be a teacher. There was no question of what I was going to be when I grow up. And I just was so inspired by what they go to work and do every day, and I wanted to be a part of that.
I love the way people see things differently, and very differently, and interact with the world very differently.
I'm a teacher in part because I love learning, and I love witnessing learning and cultivating a space where if I'm thinking about something and I know I'm not personally equipped to go as deep as I'd like to go, so I'm going to bring it to a room full of 20 people and see what we can do.
You learn so much from kids. They're educators just as anybody else here. When you get in front of those little faces, they tell you right away if your ideas are working or not.
There's a tremendous amount that is learned when you sort of deeply analyze the simple relationships and then understand those simple relationships and multiply them times everybody in the school. So the teacher-student or teacher-learner relationship is the core of the school. The multiplication of those teacher-learner relationships is going to be what your school culture becomes. In the corporate setting, people are becoming increasingly aware that culture trumps strategy even. That's how powerful culture is. And I think if we can move that understanding to schools, that a lot of what we're trying to attain through strategic or tactical means can almost entirely be attained through cultural means.
what is thinking? What is thinking?
Using your brain. You're challenging yourself really, really hard.
Thinking is not something that you tell your brain to do. Your brain does it on its own.
Why is it actually a good thing to think about our thinking?
Whenever you put your mind to do something and you think about it before you do it, you can do it. Like, you can do it no matter what.
Your thinking can actually grow by thinking.
When you actually, like, make a mistake about your brain, like, you can fix it to make it even better. Memorizing is like it's kind of like thinking of what the answer is and thinking, I don't know how to explain it.
What is thinking? It's something we ask our kids to do, but the problem is they often don't know what that means. We tell them a lot about what they need to think about, but we often don't tell them what it means to think or how thinking happens.
We all have different things in our mind, things we're trying to understand, but there is a commonality to how we come to build meaning around concepts and ideas. And kids do it naturally. We just have to remind them that they're doing it. And adults are doing it naturally, and we just have to remind them that they're doing it. I mean, it's pretty cool when you sort of really get that that's how you're understanding things. Then anything that comes up isn't as insurmountable because you know how to break it down and think it through.
Underneath all thoughts are 4 really fundamental patterns of knowledge that everybody's doing all the time. We're making distinctions between one thing and another, building systems where we break things down into parts or we group or lump them together into wholes. We're relating, making relationships between one thing and another, and we're constantly taking perspectives, either our own or other people's or other concepts.
When you build a common language in a classroom around thinking, it opens up an entirely different dialogue. So it's not just about the content and it's not just about the thinking, it's about how those two things interact to bring meaning.
And right by the road stood a white clapboard diner with a small sign hanging on its outside. There were wooden tables and chairs, black and white linoleum tiles worn by table legs, red plates on a rack that ran around the room. Even Mike turned out to look as if he was playing the part of a cook from a 1950s rerun. White pants, white shirt, white apron, white hat. "You boys look a little worse for the wear," he said. "Like you slept in a car last night. Hey, I got a load of winter wood delivered yesterday. 5 cords. I don't have time to stack it proper, and almost all of it still needs splitting. 3 boys like you could probably do it all in a morning and a part of an afternoon. $4 an hour. What do you say?" Wait, what just happened?
This guy's a little. Yeah. That's like randomly giving him a job.
Which type of thinking is going to lead us to the best conversations today?
Distinction.
What distinction did you have in mind?
When Che walked into the diner, then the cook person, Mike, was it? Mike, yeah, he didn't treat Che as if he was Cambodian. He just acted like he was part of the community and wasn't different.
Yeah.
The guy was wearing all white and the window was open, and it kind of reminded me of the hospital that Franklin was in, because he was like, Henry kept talking about like white when he was in the hospital.
So there are all these descriptions that keep repeating.
The whole and part, like the whole is like the diner, and then like we probably have to look at it deeper, like to find like the parts of it.
What other question do you think is worth talking about?
Perspective.
Okay, what do you
we have like 4 different perspectives. There's Che, there's Sanborn, there's Henry, and then there's the diner person.
There's Mike, who has no idea what's going on. Yeah, and so we've got those 4 different perspectives. They're all in the same scene. They're all in that same little diner together. They're all seeing something different. And unpacking that is going to help us to understand the scene better.
Information becomes meaning when we structure it with thinking. So we don't get knowledge or mental models or meaning simply from information. We get knowledge and mental models and meaning when we structure information using thinking. When we are aware that our mind is building things in this way, that's called metacognition, thinking about thinking or being aware of one's thinking.
Thinking is like, it's your thoughts, it's your original thing. Like, it's no one else's. It's not like you copy and pasted it into your brain. It's you.
It's in you. Doesn't matter what you don't know. You just can still use your head.
I think I have an advantage because all first graders do is think and tell me what they're thinking.
Like a book is a part of learning. Learning is a part of you because you learn. You is a part of a classroom. Like I am in the classroom. A classroom is a part of a school. It keeps adding and adding and adding. Mr. Valley told us that we needed to write something that we could explain a lot about. And mine was about my new pet Lily, my favorite fish in the world. She's still alive. Since I've looked back when I was 4, when I first started, I was like, wow, I did all that. And now I know how much better I've gotten at it.
You know, if they can't make a mess, I think something developmentally is missing. Even if it's just once a week or sketching in a sketchbook makes you a better thinker. And they say it brings test scores up in all other subject areas. Ideas can grow from somebody else's ideas. Sometimes they'll give me suggestions and I grow as an artist. They have great ideas, you know? So we grow from each other around here.
We have great faith in what we're doing here. When you walk into a classroom, you might just see a kidney-shaped table, and it might just be a kidney-shaped table to you, but to me, that's about small group instruction. They might be think blocks and they look like toys, but we know that that's changing the way that our students think about things in a classroom and about life itself. We take a workshop approach to reading and writing. It's authentic, it's meaningful for the children. There's a lot of self-selected reading and writing that goes on. Math is this big picture spiral. We never get too far away from an idea, but we're never losing track of the fact that we do math for a purpose, not just for school. We keep breaking into small groups, and we keep breaking into conversations, doing things on the iPads or creating whatever we have to create. You can't hide in a culture like that.
ISIS is right here. ISIS is right here. Netanyahu is over there. Human rights is in the back. Qatar next to Abbas, next to Hamas, King Abdullah and King Solomon. You're at the same side of the room as the Israelis. You're going to throw the ball to your worst enemy.
The greatest enemy currently facing the Iranian people is the terrorist group ISIS.
Good, so you can sit down.
And my worst enemy is Netanyahu.
I'm King Solomon, and I'd say my worst enemy is Iran.
What did we ever do to you?
I'm Haider al-Abadi, and along with many other countries, my worst enemy is ISIS.
You are not speaking from that position of what your character really thinks. You are all speaking from the point of view that will get you what you need in this context. It's an international gathering, covered internationally.
I would now like to open the debates.
Would Mohammed Morsi, the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, make the first statement, please?
Al-Sisi, my people live in fear. With a gun in their backs, they allowed you to take control. Justify your actions. Justify all the civilian deaths.
The people called for your ousting. On November 20th, you proposed to modify the Constitution, making it so that there could be no judicial checks in place for your decisions. How can you ask me to justify my actions?
I would like to bring attention to Turkey, who has been funding the Islamic State through their black market.
I wasn't aware that Turkey has a black market.
So
we cannot allow inspectors while our government is receiving crippling and ludicrous
Okay,
sanctions.
these sanctions are put in place, number one, to prevent the transfer of technology and components to your illicit nuclear program, and two,
Our
to bring you
nuclear
to the
program
negotiation
was
table
legitimately
in the first place.
started by the atoms.
By taking on a different perspective than their own and articulating and arguing from that perspective, they shifted their ability to think about their own point of view and their own perspective and to articulate and to defend and to analyze and evaluate and to question their own view of the world.
I already had some knowledge of current events and certain conflicts that were already happening in the Middle East. So learning about the history of why these conflicts occurred made me, I don't know, appreciate and understand and be more understanding of different perspectives, ones that I would usually just disagree with flat out.
I guess understanding more about the world, even though that sounds stupid, but I wrote more specific things about it. But I think I realized how petty everything else is. Like, I realized all of the things I've been focusing on since I'm like a teenager and I have all this angst. It's just like so petty and it's so ridiculous. And not to be like downsizing my problems, but it makes me feel kind of guilty in a way. All right, that's what I learned, I guess.
For my whole life, I've felt like the things that I hear on the radio and in speeches and interviews with people who are politically involved, whether they be presidents or otherwise, there's been levels of complexities. I mean, it's been an illusion. I've thought that there were levels of complexities in what they were saying that I couldn't understand. And while I do still acknowledge the complexities, I also realize that there is this baseline of understanding in what different people are saying and what's going on that I can base future learning off of. And so now it's like listening to the radio. It all makes sense in a way that it hadn't before.
I think I learned a lot about how I deal with various types of stressful situations and what my general reactions are, and I know now most of them aren't very healthy, so what I'm going to try and do is try to improve how I handle those types of situations and work on, making my weaknesses into strengths.
I think I learned a lot about how I think. Like what ways, how I'll approach looking at something from what direction.
We're a democratic school. Kids get lots of experience of what it is like to be engaged in community and what it's like to be involved in making decisions. Teachers solicit from students, this is our question, how are we going to approach it? Where are we going to go with these ideas? That makes it possible for kids to take risks and try new things, for teachers to take risks and try new things.
We are learning about something I'm interested in. Kids are saying something I want to learn about, and so I'm learning how to learn myself. That's very transferable. I can do that with lots of different things in my life.
I always have a reason for doing an activity. I can tell you 20 reasons why this activity is wonderful. But if I just ask the students instead after an activity, what happened? What did you notice? They understand and they'll teach me about what the activity offers, and they understand metacognition if they have to explain what happened next and what happened next with their thinking and what they heard. And if you open the space for that metacognitive conversation, students get better and better and better at it, and then they start bringing it up themselves.
And I was wondering, like, the distinction between, you were saying earlier, the American dream and then the dream. Because, like, the American dream, I think of, like, the 50s, like, the perfect white family, and the 2 kids, and the dog. As a black person of his time, there was that dream, which was completely different than the white dream. But yeah, I was just wondering what anybody else thought about the distinction between the dream and the American dream.
Well, I'm not black, but I'm also not really white. So I was always like kind of disconnected from this. Like he says, the difference is black and white, not rich and poor. I'm like, I get it. Like that's a lot more important, and I don't really have anything to say about that because I don't really fit in. It's like they made a puzzle, and then there are all these extra pieces, but we're not really focusing on those, I guess. We're focusing on the puzzle.
This is the space where people can cultivate the tools of citizenship, and if you skip that part, you have a population of people who don't know how to make sense of what's coming at them, and students become alienated from the curriculum because it doesn't tell their stories or relate to their lives. That's not how the world is. And it's boring, and it's oversimplified, and it's dangerous.
With the ability to converse with your teachers comes the ability to say, like, this assignment isn't working for me, or is it okay if I focus on this? And that allowed me to really feed into my strengths and evolve as a learner and figure out what works best for me. I wasn't seen as just a student or someone who's like young and therefore not capable of having my own agenda. Having that faith placed in me was very empowering and made me feel like I could do things that I wouldn't normally do.
If you tell a student that if they see a problem, they have to wait for an adult to fix it, when they become an adult, they're not going to know how to fix it. But the students here really have a sense of how they can put their efforts into fixing a problem when they see it.
These schools get a lot of visitors. When they come in, they tell me that they felt something different about the school immediately. When you look into classrooms, it takes a while to know where the teacher is. You just see a lot of independent behavior on the part of the students. They're driving the car of the class quite often.
Everything we're being taught about is something I want to know about. So I've never read as much as I have this year, actually.
There was a woman who rode the bus to a nearby school that a lot of Bard students were on, coming from 14th Street down to the Lower East Side. She said, "I hate the way your students dress, but I love what they talk about." And what they talk about on a bus often has to do with what they're reading and studying.
If your morality isn't essentialized, are your thoughts and ideas not your own then either?
So what does she mean by not essentialized?
Like the world around you, like teaches you like how you should think, and like you end up thinking like that.
We have been like culturally conditioned to have these different forms of moral reasoning.
Is this like really how I feel, or is this somebody telling me how to feel and then I internalize it and so it's how I feel?
One of the components, one of the principles the early college is built on is this thing called writing and thinking, or language and thinking. It's a program that has various classroom practices using language to dive more deeply into a text and how to learn something using writing. Because they've been writing about these things, they're quite capable of referring to what someone said before them in the class discussion and building on it. And these are really very rare things in public education or in education.
These students have been reading Quixote, the Don Quixote, over the course of an entire year. What we've been working on this semester is how to formulate an interesting, controversial argument. And what they're doing is they're leading guided discussions about their own topic. And they're using writing and thinking to do that. So first they have to write a short response to each thesis statement, and then they share it and then they discuss it. The students take agency. They really like to do this because they're defending their point of view.
Vuestras monografías, así que si podemos abrir un poco la conversación a todos. Empezamos con la de Gabriel. La educación sin control es algo negativo.
Con demasiado control es fácil para el instructor limitar la educación y forzar sus creencias en el estudiante, y el estudiante puede tener creencias basadas en mentiras o evidencia parcial, y estoy en favor de más liberalidad en la educación.
Y creo que en esta época la educación sin control no es tan valorada como la del pueblo.
Al tener la educación como los duques y Sansón, ellos lo usan como forma de poder para manipular a los demás que no tienen educación, ni dinero, ni nada que pueda sobrepasar a las personas de suertes.
This school is not for kids who think of adults as the other side. The less they know, the better. We want kids to reach in and begin to develop confidence that they are thinking people whose take on things is worth hearing. Coming from middle school, they become good at dealing with packaged things that can be tested. What's going to take the place of the conventions that I've mastered? They learn pretty quickly that trying to live without them feels a lot better than trying to live with them.
In middle school, I tried to write my papers as much as I thought that my teachers may had wanted to read them. And now it's more about what I wanted to say and what I thought.
I used to think that there was an answer for everything, and there was this one answer, this one correct answer. That there's a lot of gray area, and there's a lot of things that kids do not talk about.
Every time I participate in our consumerist culture, I have a little bit of stress because I feel yes, I'm enjoying shopping, but at the same time, it's not just me buying a bag, it's me adding to an entire structure that is harming me and everyone around me.
That's one of the biggest fears I have, just in the long term, how much we waste and how much we do just for pleasure and for the moment, even though we really don't need to.
Because the world is growing at such a large pace, we're kind of being forced to be more interconnected. And I think that's also a good thing because these mindsets that were rooted in old-fashioned ways of thinking can be changed if we expose them to new ways of thinking.
If we do these things, if we have the seminar, if we have the writing and thinking, our test scores are going to come out all right, and we won't spend all of our time teaching to the test.
We have high-stakes testing in New Jersey, and they're starting to give us some targets that we have to hit. That's not the goal, though.
We are a public school, so because the Common Core standards are so specific, even if you're not teaching to the test, you have to teach to the standards. Straddling both worlds is what we're doing now.
I learned absolutely no work ethic or skills like that from a traditional education because it came so easily to me. I'm a good test taker, so I could not go to class and still get a perfect score.
Well, I think that some tests I take as a chance to prove myself, and some tests I take as, stress, stress, arg. I have to complete this big thing and it's coming for me. What am I going to do?
We're so focused on competitiveness and trying to lift everybody up to the top that the net effect is over time there's a decrease in the allowance for natural curiosity and exploration, seeking questions rather than answers.
It simply is true that in math, you can come up with a wrong answer and you have to be told that the answer is wrong. But tell me the reasoning that you went through to get there, because I'll get some insight into how you interpreted the situation or the physical principle or whatever.
We just got our test scores back. There were very clear distinctions between teachers who have embraced thinking skills and metacognition, and then classrooms who haven't. It's like that piece that we were hoping for because we can see it. It's observable in so many other ways, but now it's measurable.
I can 100% put it towards not teaching to the test. I would give them the basic information that they would need and then backfill it with thinking skills and teach them how to apply it to different things. And I know that's why my scores were the way they were. Those kids were confident that they could think for themselves and solve problems.
Many schools regard themselves as being good because they have all these bells and whistles. Well, actually, when the electricity fails and you have a good teacher and a piece of chalk, class can go on.
If you think about kids or adults or any human, if you could give them the gift of knowing how they come to know things, it makes knowing anything possible. Right? It makes any idea possible. It makes massive, innovative, big, audacious goals that can change everything possible.
The jobs that are going to exist in the future are going to require thinking. What I'm seeing in classrooms across our country is that the young people who look like me or are coming from poverty aren't put in situations where they're asked to do that. They're being put into situations where they're required to give the right answer in order to pass a particular test, in order to get a particular score to go on to the next grade or course. If we aren't careful, we will create a society that has only a few folks who can work, and everyone else will be in a tough situation.
When we structure things and we get them used to, you move when we tell you to move, you move when the bell rings. I answer your question when I feel like answering your question, and when the time comes, it's scary. Then we're going to release them into a world where that is not the case.
If a child makes it from 1 year old to 24 years old without knowing Pythagorean theorem, are we okay with that? If a child makes it from 1 year old to 24 years old without knowing how to treat others, are we okay with that?
Yeah, and it says, say good morning to a teacher or classmate.
As someone new to play at recess.
Yeah.
You're trying to get everybody to feel like they really mean something.
Yeah.
Instead of just making them feel like they don't even matter. You need to make them feel like they really do.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing with my own children and other children that I have a chance to interact with is that they all need and want, and we must provide them with love. What it means to forgive, what it means to be unselfish, to care, to be truthful, thoughtful. When one is truly forgiving and trusting, they will think through complex issues, as opposed to quickly taking a side or believing what they're told.
This is a two-part class. So the first semester of photography, we're in here, the dark room, shooting and developing and printing. The second semester of the course is a visual sociology project. We've been doing a variety of things, just exploring media and its effects on us and how we personally relate. So the Movers and Shapers project was just kind of finding someone or a group of people or something that had really shaped us as a person. So I thought about my past experiences and how I had a really terrible time in elementary school. It felt kind of liberating to just like write about it and express those feelings. I really wanted to explore the concept of being boxed in, so I decided to hang my project in a large walkable cardboard box.
She worked through a lot to get a sense of her own experience, in this case of being bullied in elementary school.
Reader's attention. So we have our climax, and in this story there was a fight or an altercation between the shy loner kid and the bully. At the end, the kid realizes that you should just be yourself, that you can't change other people. All right? Now that's from the perspective of the kid being bullied. What I want you guys to try and do now, think about the story from the opposite perspective. I want you to take this same story idea, but I want you to think about it from the bully's point of view. Why is the bully doing this to the kid? And this is going to be a tough thing, but I'm really excited to see what we can come up with in pairs and groups. Why would the bully be doing this to a kid? Change the mindset, change the perspective, change the point of view.
The mom or the dad is not treating the kid nicely?
Yeah. So he's feeling
anger out on
him.
Yeah.
And then it just gets worse at school.
Yeah.
And it's just he's having a tough time in his life.
Beautiful. That's great.
Yeah, he realizes that he can't take the anger out from his house into this one kid. He realizes that he's just breaking the kid down.
Sad,
Depressed.
Depressed.
The moment his mom died, everything changed. His dad started being mean, and he started being mean. Sounds good, right?
Guys, you have about 5 minutes left, and I want to share a few of these.
His trait was like he was facade.
He had a facade.
Because he thought he wanted to be like strong inside.
Very good.
He has like everything. Like he gets what he wants.
Okay, very good. So the bully's envious of this other kid.
Yeah. The hook was, she looks over at the calendar. A new kid, hooray. For once in my life, I have a chance to make a friend.
It's really common sometimes, I feel like, that we actually tend to talk down to children in some ways. And we don't always give them credit for how intelligent they are and the things they can actually do. So much pressure is being placed on schools and teachers with some of these new reforms that are this snapshot at the end of the year of student achievement. But school is a much bigger picture than that.
One of the things that we know is that we can positively affect student achievement by extending their thinking, by getting them to think more, by getting them to think deeper, by being able to articulate what it is that they see and what it is that they observe and what it is that they think.
Now, what's going to happen in an age where there's lots of information and we've trained all the kids to be consumers of information, not builders of knowledge? We're talking about creating 21st century minds in the 21st century, and it takes like 20 years, 30 years delay to create these minds, and we need them yesterday. Introducing our kids to their mind. We give them the gift of self-awareness, of self, of the ability of the self to interact with others, to be a part of something, and yet to have an identity, and to have a perspective, and yet to see other perspectives. This isn't just about knowing math better or science better. This is about knowing ourselves better and knowing others better. And boy, do we need that in this world today.
We run the educational component for treatment programs for students with emotional and behavioral disorders. We've taken a cadre of teachers that deal with some of our toughest kids, trained them in this method, and watched some very dramatic results with those students, as well as really dramatic results in the professional behavior of our teachers.
The results that we got far exceeded our expectations.
not only from the perspective of achievement. Across 3 to 5 months, we saw a 74% jump in achievement because of the population of students that we were working with. We also saw a 58% reduction in behavior issues.
When a 17-year-old boy goes up to his teacher and says, "Mr. George, would it be okay if I take what we've been learning in science and apply it to my treatment," which is the counseling part of what they're getting in these programs, that's a pretty powerful happening. Or the girl who goes to her teacher and says, "Finally, somebody understands how I think."
There's the school system, and there are people who work and operate within the school system. And I think that in their hearts and at the core, all teachers want to connect with their students. And that if we can really challenge ourselves to reconnect with the heart and soul of what education is and should be, and realize that it's the system that's creating the behaviors that we see and the outcomes that we see, and not the people, I think there's a place to start there.
So how do we support teachers? Part of it has to come through professional development, in which we can help teachers acquire a set of tools and skills to become a working collaborative group who know how to help each other.
This is a really exciting time in education. The best way, I think, to move education forward is to share all the bests and to let teachers make decisions, because the best for you may not be the best for me, but I like those components. I'm gonna take those, but that wouldn't work for my kids. There needs to be more time for that. There needs to be more time for teachers to be able to work together.
We need to help each other. We need to be in this collaboratively, and a lot of schools, a lot of districts are recognizing the power of that. And once they've had that experience, teachers want to do more of it.
Teachers are getting so many different directives thrown at them, and they're trying to achieve this, and they're trying to achieve that, and they have to be here, and they have to, complete this, and they're being evaluated like that. They're so caught up in all these things they have to do, it's like they're juggling, and they have to stop and think about, wait a second, I have all these resources, I have all these goals and expectations. What does all this mean, and how do I begin processing it?
If you can take a step back and really think about how humans learn, sort of stop the madness of the bureaucratic management of what is a natural process between and among humans, adult humans and small humans, how to think about things, to build meaning out of new things, and allow that to have a little bit more space to happen as it should happen. So those things come out in the dynamics of the classroom. Those things are built in the relationship between teacher and learner, and also just by the culture of the system around teaching and learning.
One of my fantasies is that the classroom space is uncensored, and that because we are able to say whatever we want in that space because it's safe, and we know that we're mucking around with half-formed thoughts and maybe unpacking some stale biases, that then instead of the hallway becoming the space where you just say whatever you want with no consequence, it's flipped.
I want you confused. My job is to confuse you.
Yeah.
Because if they're confused, they're thinking about it.
Yes.
Whereas if they don't care, they're no longer confused. If they've given up, then there is no confusion. It's just, it is what it is.
What we sometimes think is best for our kids is to simplify things, to take away struggle. And that's taking away learning.
Learning is messy. In the beginning of my teaching, I want everything really cookie cutter and really organized, because I always felt like if I gave too much freedom, there would be complete chaos and that I wouldn't get any of my objectives accomplished. And then over time, I started to let go a little bit. The more I started letting go, the more I wanted to let go. And then eventually I was just, okay, it's yours. They want a little freedom. They don't want to be told exactly what they need to know and memorize things. They really want to be creative, and they want to let their brains work.
In terms of all of this, I'm of the belief that knowledge is more powerful than any weapon. But in the gaps of my knowledge and power is someone else's, and that is where I find my fears, chaos, and discord.
But in the gaps of my knowledge and power is someone else's, and that is where I find my fears, chaos, and discord.
Imagine if we keep rolling out children that are really good at school, and that's all they're good at. They're not good at thinking. They're not good at making distinctions and thinking in systems and relationships and perspectives. They're not good at analyzing. They can't critique something. They can't look for bias. Who works on that? It's not really embedded in any subject area per se. So it has to become something and part of your culture in everything that you do.
Adults, when we're adults, are going to be different from adults now. I assume that culture is going to be different too.
Basically, right now, all we're doing is brainstorming. Yeah. And trying to figure out what our current system is, what's wrong with it, and how can we change it for the better in a way that actually is possible.
Yeah, so that's sort of a big distinction shift, which it doesn't seem super significant, but it, like a distinction shift like that can really change the way that teachers and students interact in real life. Like if we think of students as adults in training, then they'll see themselves not as like underneath teachers, but as learning with them.
Each of these, right?
Yeah, so your assessment's gonna be lifelike. Everything should be a reflection of real life situations. So we didn't actually define what makes a good student, or like what makes...
What we need to be as students.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you guys think? Like committed / motivated?
Look at this.
Yeah, I was reading How to Make Friends and Influence People, and it said 85% of your job is based off how well you can work with people.
Oh yeah, this is what we just
And 15% is how much you actually know.
Okay, so the future is prepares for life, and we need the now.
So this is, it's supposed to prepare us for life back then, but
more like
life was
preparing
a
us for
factory
tests.
back then.
And so in being assessed, you're really being, instead of being about do you know the knowledge, it's really about...
Are you ready?
Yeah, are you ready?
Not just academically, but based on life and based off the things that happen in life. Are you prepared for... Are you prepared for a job? Are you prepared for this? Are you prepared for that? Really bridge the gap between profession and knowledge, and how you're going to use that knowledge to succeed in your profession.
All right, we believe that students should not be viewed as subjects to be taught, but adults in training.
Yes, good.
A good society has thinkers, people who think, and by educating these kids to think, they're going to grow up to be good people, good workers, have good families of their own, and hopefully, the cycle just continues and it filters on up through, our local, state, national government, and it reflects on our society about how people act and are engaged and, work out our problems and differences together.
Thinking is what allows us to make meaning of the world. And the thing that really lies at the base of what it means to be a citizen in society or a part of a democracy. It's the thing that makes us human.
The goal is to produce a citizenry capable of thinking carefully and thoughtfully and critically for the rest of their lives.
I think we have to get away from the game of school. And the game of school is do enough to get a good grade and not really worry about the learning. All of us have played it at some point in our lives. And my aha moment was when I was 19 years old. And I decided I was done with the game. I'd played it well enough to understand how to manipulate it. And I swore that if I ever was... You got me, Deb.
Yeah.
That if I ever was I swore that if I ever was in charge of a school or a school district, that we would get as far away from playing that game as humanly possible, that we would focus on the child and not the game.
You know, we talk a lot about how American schools are failing and how we have this ideal that someone's just going to kind of swoop in and save American schools. When we really utilize thinking and we understand how to think, we can be our own Superman, and we can be Superman for our kids because they are going to have this very transferable skill set that is going to traject them through their lives.
It's about seeing every child, and it comes down to that relationship between the teacher and the student is all about seeing each other.
Josephine is one of the most focused people I've ever met.
I remember the first time we met.
Violet, you have undergone nothing short of a transformation. Matt is an adventurer. Don't worry.
Adrian, you write. You write about what you've read, what you've experienced, what you feel, what you believe. You write to understand the world and to connect to it. You write to create and to destroy. You write.
Personalization is important. My teachers know me and can struggle with me.
And when Lucas finally does speak, folks truly listen.
He's got talent. He's got his own curriculum.
Do not underestimate yourself.
Steadfastly teaching us all what it means to live with a disability.
Observing first, then asking questions to better understand the subject. You see science all around you.
You can ask what's at stake and you can say everything. But if you break it down a little bit more and you say, here's a kid and what's at stake, locally around that kid, what's at stake is self-awareness, a love of learning.
Someday they're going to leave here and want them to be the best citizens that they can possibly be.
It's about thinking, and it transcends cultural, linguistic, national lines.
You think to learn, like our book, Thinking to Learn, Learning to Think. It's easy. No matter what, you can think no matter what.